One evening, as they stood outside the center after a particularly busy day, Sarah turned to Mike with a smile. "Do you ever think about how this all started? A broken-down car and a stranger with a toolbox." Mike chuckled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "It's funny, isn't it? You never know where life will take you." "No," Sarah agreed, her voice soft. "But I think we ended up exactly where we were supposed to be." As they watched the sun set over the town, casting a golden glow over the center that had become their legacy, they felt a profound sense of gratitude. Their journey had been anything but easy, but it had been worth every moment. Together, they had built something that would outlast them, a ripple effect that would continue to spread, touching lives and changing the world, one act of kindness at a time. Then, something shifted. Dr. Carter's brows furrowed slightly, and he leaned closer to the monitor. He adjusted the wand's position, his movements slower now, more deliberate. Lily's heart began to race. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned the screen slightly, angling it away from her view. "I'm seeing something here that I wasn't expecting," he said carefully. "It's unusual." Mark, who had been quietly rocking Sophie nearby, stood up and moved closer. "Unusual how?" he asked, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "I'd like to run some additional tests," Dr. Carter replied, his tone measured. "It's too early to jump to conclusions, but there's a shadow, something that doesn't look quite right." The word shadow hung in the air like a dark cloud. Lily's mind raced with possibilities. Could it be a complication from the C-section? An infection? Something worse? Her breath quickened as anxiety tightened its grip on her chest. "Is it serious?" she asked, her voice trembling. Dr. Carter placed a reassuring hand on her arm. "I don't want you to worry just yet. It could be something minor, but I want to be thorough. We'll schedule a follow-up scan and some blood work to get a clearer picture." Lily nodded, though the reassurance did little to calm her nerves. As Dr. Carter stepped out of the room to arrange the tests, she turned to Mark, her eyes brimming with tears. "What if it's something bad?" she whispered. Mark placed a hand on her shoulder, his grip firm and comforting. "We don't know anything yet," he said, his voice steady. "Let's take it one step at a time. Whatever it is, we'll face it together." Despite his calm demeanor, Lily could see the worry etched in his face. The uncertainty was unbearable, and as they left the clinic that day, her mind was a whirlwind of fear and unanswered questions. She couldn't shake the image of Dr. Carter's furrowed brow or the ominous word, shadow. That night, Lily lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Sophie slept peacefully in the bassinet beside her. Every strange sensation in her body felt magnified, each one a potential clue to a mystery she desperately wanted to solve. She couldn't stop herself from spiraling into a rabbit hole of online research, reading about postpartum complications, rare conditions, and worst-case scenarios. By the time the sun rose, she was more exhausted than ever, but determination had replaced her fear. Whatever was happening, she needed answers, not just for herself but for Sophie. Her daughter deserved a mother who was healthy and present, and Lily vowed to do everything in her power to ensure that. A week later, Lily found herself back in Dr. Carter's office, this time for the follow-up scan. The tension in the room was palpable as the ultrasound machine came to life once again. This time, Dr. Carter's expression shifted almost immediately. He adjusted the wand and took a deep breath, his lips pressing into a thin line. "What is it?" Lily asked, her voice steady but insistent. Dr. Carter hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Lily, there's something unusual in your uterus. It's not a mass or an infection. It appears to be another pregnancy." Lily's mind reeled. "What do you mean, another pregnancy?" "I just gave birth 6 weeks ago." Dr. Carter nodded. "It's extremely rare, but it looks like there was a second embryo during your initial pregnancy that went undetected. For some reason, it didn't develop at the same rate as your daughter. It's what we call a delayed interval twin." The room seemed to tilt as Lily tried to process his words. Another pregnancy? A delayed twin? It sounded like something out of a medical drama, not her own life. Mark, standing beside her, was equally stunned. Is the baby okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter's expression softened. "It's too early to say. There are significant risks to both the baby and Lily. We'll need to monitor this closely and discuss your options moving forward." Lily's hand instinctively moved to her abdomen, her fingers pressing gently against the place where a new life, unexpected and fragile, had been hiding. In that moment, fear gave way to a strange and profound sense of awe. Despite the uncertainty, despite the risks, she felt an undeniable connection to this tiny, unseen presence. As she looked at Mark and then at Sophie, she realized that her family was about to face an extraordinary journey, one that would test their strength, their faith, and their capacity for love in ways they never could have imagined. Lily woke up to the soft cries of Sophie, the baby's voice muffled but insistent through the baby monitor on the nightstand. She groggily rolled over and reached for it, squinting at the small screen where Sophie's chubby face appeared, her tiny fists flailing. Mark was still asleep beside her, one arm draped over his eyes, his even breathing a stark contrast to the wakefulness that had become Lily's norm. Sophie's cries grew louder, pulling Lily fully out of her fog. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and padded down the hall to Sophie's nursery, her bare feet cool against the wooden floor. The morning light filtered through the sheer curtains, painting the room in soft gold hues. "Good morning, sweet girl," Lily cooed, lifting Sophie from her crib and holding her close. The baby immediately quieted, her tiny face burrowing into Lily's shoulder. This was her favorite part of the day, the calm before the chaos, when the world seemed to pause, leaving just the two of them in their bubble. As she carried Sophie downstairs, Lily felt a sharp twinge in her lower abdomen. She winced, pausing on the staircase. It wasn't the first time she'd felt it, but the sensation seemed sharper today, more insistent. She adjusted Sophie's weight in her arms and took a deep breath, dismissing it as yet another postpartum ache. After all, wasn't recovery supposed to be messy and unpredictable? In the kitchen, she set Sophie in her bouncer and began preparing a bottle. The rhythmic hum of the coffee maker was a comforting sound, a reminder of the small rituals that grounded her in this new chapter of life. As she poured the formula into the bottle, her mind wandered back to the strange sensations she'd been experiencing. It wasn't just the occasional pain, there were other things too. The feeling of fluttering deep inside her, almost like when she first felt Sophie move during her pregnancy. At first, she'd dismissed it as muscle spasms or her body's way of readjusting. But over the past few weeks, it had become harder to ignore. There were nights when she lay awake, her hands resting on her abdomen, feeling those faint flutters and wondering if her mind was playing tricks on her. When Sophie finished her bottle, Lily placed her in the playpen and settled on the couch with her coffee. She scrolled through her phone, half-heartedly browsing parenting forums and postpartum advice articles. Every so often, a headline about rare postpartum conditions or complications would catch her eye, and she'd feel a pang of anxiety. "Stop overthinking," she muttered to herself, setting the phone aside. Mark appeared in the doorway, his hair disheveled, still half asleep. "Morning," he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead before scooping Sophie into his arms. "How's my favorite girl this morning?" Lily smiled, watching the way Mark's face lit up when Sophie giggled. Despite the sleepless nights and the whirlwind of emotions that came with parenthood, moments like this made everything worth it. But the unease lingered. As the day went on, the twinges in her abdomen became more frequent, and the fluttering sensation returned, stronger this time. By the afternoon, she found herself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the number for her OBGYN's office on her phone. "Are you okay?" Mark asked, walking in with Sophie balanced on his hip. I don't know, Lily admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. She explained the sensations she'd been feeling, the growing sense that something wasn't right. Mark listened intently, his brow furrowed. Maybe you should call, he said gently. Even if it's nothing, it's better to be sure. Lily nodded, taking a deep breath before dialing the number. The receptionist scheduled her for an appointment later that week, and though it gave her some relief, the days leading up to it were filled with a gnawing sense of dread. On the morning of her appointment, Lily woke up before the alarm, her mind racing. Mark had taken the day off work to join her, and his presence was a comfort as they packed Sophie's diaper bag and headed to the clinic. The car ride was mostly silent, the weight of unspoken fears hanging between them. As they sat in the waiting room, Lily's eyes wandered to the other patients, pregnant women with glowing faces, some accompanied by partners, others with small children in tow. She felt a pang of envy for their apparent normalcy, the simplicity of their worries compared to the storm brewing inside her. When the nurse called her name, Lily's heart raced. Mark gave her hand a reassuring squeeze as they followed the nurse to the examination room. Dr. Carter greeted them with his usual warmth, but Lily could see the hint of concern in his eyes as she described her symptoms. We'll start with an ultrasound to see what's going on, he said, his tone calm but serious. Lily lay back on the examination table, the cool gel on her abdomen sending a shiver through her body. As Dr. Carter moved the wand across her stomach, the room fell silent. Lily's eyes were fixed on the ceiling, her breath shallow. Then, she noticed Dr. Carter's expression change. His brows furrowed, and he adjusted the wand, his movements slower and more deliberate. What is it? Lily asked, her voice tinged with panic. Dr. Carter didn't answer immediately. Instead, he angled the screen slightly, his gaze focused on the image. I'm seeing something unusual, he said finally. Mark leaned closer, his hand tightening around Lily's. Unusual how? Dr. Carter hesitated, as if searching for the right words. There's a shadow here, something I wasn't expecting. It doesn't look like a mass or scar tissue, but I can't be certain without further tests. The word shadow sent a chill down Lily's spine. Her mind raced with possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. Was it a complication from the C-section? A tumor? Something worse? I'd like to schedule additional imaging and blood work, Dr. Carter continued. It's important to rule out any serious conditions. Lily nodded, though her mind was already spiraling. As they left the clinic, Mark tried to reassure her, but his own worry was evident. That night, as she lay in bed, Lily couldn't stop replaying Dr. Carter's words. The shadow, the uncertainty, it was all too much. Over the next few days, Lily threw herself into caring for Sophie, trying to distract herself from the growing fear. But the symptoms persisted, and with them came a new sensation, an overwhelming fatigue that seemed to seep into her very bones. When the follow-up appointment finally arrived, Lily felt both relieved and terrified. This time, the ultrasound revealed more than just a shadow. As Dr. Carter explained the findings, Lily's world shifted in a way she never could have anticipated. The ordinary days leading up to this moment suddenly seemed like a distant memory, a time when life was simple and predictable. In the face of the unknown, Lily knew one thing for certain: her life was about to change forever. And no matter what lay ahead, she would face it with the same strength and determination that had carried her through motherhood so far. The morning of Lily's second scan dawned gray and overcast, mirroring the storm of emotions swirling inside her. She barely touched the breakfast Mark had prepared, pushing scrambled eggs around her plate while Sophie babbled in her high chair. Mark tried to keep the mood light, making silly faces at their daughter, but Lily could see the tension in his jaw and the worry etched into the corners of his eyes. It's going to be okay, Mark said softly as he reached across the table to take her hand. His touch was warm and steady, but even his calm demeanor couldn't silence the doubt screaming in her mind. The drive to the clinic felt longer than usual, each mile stretching into an eternity. Lily stared out the window, watching raindrops race down the glass, her thoughts darting between worst-case scenarios and desperate prayers for a simple explanation. Her abdomen throbbed faintly, a reminder of the sensations that had brought her here. At the clinic, Dr. Carter greeted them with his usual professionalism, but Lily could sense an undercurrent of concern in his voice. He explained the need for a more detailed ultrasound and possibly an MRI if necessary. As she settled onto the examination table, she felt a lump rise in her throat, the weight of the unknown pressing heavily on her chest. The ultrasound technician began the scan, her movements precise and methodical. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the machine and the occasional tapping of the technician's keyboard. Lily's eyes darted between the technician's face and the screen, searching for any hint of reassurance. Then, the technician's expression changed. She paused, her brow furrowing as she adjusted the wand. She glanced at Dr. Carter, who had been reviewing notes on a nearby computer. "Doctor, you might want to take a look at this," she said, her voice carefully neutral. Dr. Carter stepped forward, his eyes narrowing as he studied the screen. Lily's heart pounded as the silence stretched on, each second feeling like an eternity. Finally, Dr. Carter turned to her, his expression serious but measured. "Lily," he began, his tone calm but deliberate, "what we're seeing here is unusual. It appears that you have a second pregnancy, a twin that wasn't detected during your initial ultrasounds." Lily blinked, her mind struggling to process his words. "A twin? But, how?" she stammered. "It's an extremely rare condition called delayed interval delivery," Dr. Carter explained. "In some cases, one twin can develop normally while the other's development is delayed or even paused for a time. It's possible that this second twin was overlooked during your earlier scans because of its position or lack of development at the time." Lily stared at him, her thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief, confusion, and awe. She turned to Mark, who looked equally stunned. "So, there's another baby?" she whispered. Dr. Carter nodded. "Yes, but this situation is complicated. The delayed development means there are significant risks, to both you and the baby. We'll need to conduct more tests to determine the best course of action." The drive home was silent, the weight of the revelation settling heavily between them. Lily clutched her abdomen, her mind racing with questions. How had this been missed? What would happen now? Could she carry this second baby safely, or would the risks be too great? Over the next few days, Lily underwent a battery of tests, blood work, additional scans, and consultations with specialists. Each visit brought new information, but also new uncertainties. The second baby, a boy, was smaller than expected for his gestational age, and there were concerns about his viability. Meanwhile, Lily's own health was under close scrutiny. The physical toll of carrying a delayed twin so soon after delivering Sophie was significant, and the doctors warned of potential complications. As the news spread among family and close friends, the reactions were a mix of shock, concern, and cautious optimism. Lily's mother, a pillar of strength in their family, flew in from out of town to help with Sophie and provide emotional support. "You're stronger than you think, Lily," she said one evening as they sat in the nursery, folding tiny onesies and talking in hushed tones. But Lily didn't feel strong. She felt terrified of making the wrong decision, of putting her life or her son's life at risk, of leaving Sophie without a mother if the worst should happen. One evening, as she sat alone in the living room, scrolling through her phone in search of stories about other women who had faced similar situations, she stumbled upon a support group for mothers of multiples. The stories she read were both heartbreaking and inspiring, filled with tales of resilience and love in the face of unimaginable challenges. Lily hesitated, her finger hovering over the join button. Finally, she clicked it, and within minutes, she was greeted by messages from women around the world, each offering words of encouragement and sharing their own experiences. For the first time since the ordeal began, she felt a flicker of hope. But hope wasn't enough to quiet the doubts and fears that plagued her. As the weeks went on, the physical demands of her situation grew more intense. The fluttering sensations in her abdomen became more pronounced, a constant reminder of the life growing inside her. At the same time, she began experiencing bouts of dizziness and fatigue that left her struggling to keep up with Sophie's needs. Mark tried to shoulder as much of the burden as he could, taking on late-night feedings and household chores while juggling his demanding job. But the strain on their relationship was evident. Arguments flared over seemingly trivial issues, their frustrations bubbling to the surface in moments of exhaustion. "We're going to get through this," Mark said one night after a particularly heated argument. "I know it feels impossible right now, but we have to believe that we'll come out the other side stronger." Lily wanted to believe him, but the path ahead felt anything but certain. One evening, during a routine checkup, Dr. Carter sat them down to discuss their options. The risks of continuing the pregnancy were significant, and he outlined the potential complications in stark terms. "This is a decision only you can make," he said, his voice steady but empathetic. "Whatever you decide, we'll support you every step of the way." Lily felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. How could she choose between her own life and the life of her unborn son? The thought of losing him was unbearable, but so was the thought of leaving Sophie and Mark behind. That night, as she sat in the nursery rocking Sophie to sleep, she found herself talking to the tiny life inside her. "I don't know what the right choice is," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But I promise you this, I'll do everything in my power to protect you, no matter what." The days that followed were a blur of consultations, second opinions, and endless discussions. Each decision felt impossibly heavy, the stakes higher than anything Lily had ever faced. But through it all, she clung to the hope that somehow, against all odds, they would find a way to move forward. And as the fluttering in her abdomen grew stronger, she began to feel a connection to her son, a bond that gave her the strength to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The hospital room buzzed with an undercurrent of tension. Nurses moved briskly around Lily, adjusting monitors and preparing equipment. Finally, a new sound broke through the noise, a tiny, weak cry that pierced the room like a beacon. Her son had been delivered. The sound was faint, almost fragile, but it was there. Tears welled up in Lily's eyes as she turned her head, desperate to catch a glimpse of him. A nurse brought him over briefly before rushing him to the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU. He was impossibly small, his skin translucent and his tiny chest rising and falling with shallow breaths. "You did it," Mark whispered, his voice thick with emotion. He leaned down to kiss her forehead, his tears mingling with hers. "He's here, Lily. He's here." But the fight was far from over. The baby, whom they named Samuel, weighed barely 2 pounds and faced a daunting battle for survival. His lungs were underdeveloped, and he required immediate intervention to stabilize his breathing. The NICU became his world, a place of wires, monitors, and constant vigilance. For Lily, the days that followed were a roller coaster of emotions. She was torn between her recovery and the overwhelming need to be by Samuel's side. Her body ached from the surgery, and the emotional toll left her feeling drained. But every time she saw him, tiny and vulnerable but undeniably alive, she found a renewed sense of purpose. The NICU was both a place of hope and heartbreak. Lily and Mark spent hours there each day, sitting by Samuel's incubator, watching his tiny chest rise and fall with each labored breath. The nurses and doctors became their lifeline, offering guidance and support as they navigated the uncertainty of Samuel's condition. There were moments of triumph, like the day Samuel's oxygen levels stabilized for the first time or when he managed to take a few milliliters of milk through a feeding tube. But there were also setbacks, times when his condition worsened, and the doctors had to intervene urgently. Each high and low was a reminder of the fragility of life, and Lily often found herself oscillating between hope and despair. Back at home, Sophie became a source of solace for Lily. Her giggles and milestones brought moments of joy that punctuated the uncertainty surrounding Samuel. Lily's mother stayed with them during this time, helping with Sophie and offering a steady presence that grounded them in the chaos. One evening, after a particularly grueling day at the hospital, Lily sat alone in the nursery, cradling one of Samuel's preemie-sized onesies in her hands. It was impossibly small, a stark reminder of how much he still had to grow. She closed her eyes and whispered a prayer, asking for strength, not just for herself, but for Samuel, for Mark, for Sophie, and for their family as a whole. As the weeks turned into months, Samuel began to make progress. His lungs grew stronger, and he no longer needed the ventilator. The day he was finally able to move from the incubator to an open crib was a milestone Lily and Mark celebrated with tears of joy. The nurses cheered alongside them, their bond with the family evident in the warmth of their smiles. When the day finally came for Samuel to go home, it felt like a miracle. The journey had been grueling, filled with moments of doubt and fear, but it had also been a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. As they left the hospital, Samuel bundled tightly in his car seat, Lily felt a profound sense of gratitude, for the medical team that had saved him, for the community that had rallied around them, and for the strength she hadn't known she possessed. At home, life slowly began to find its new rhythm. Samuel required ongoing care and frequent checkups, but his presence brought a renewed sense of joy to their family. Sophie, now a curious and energetic toddler, took on the role of protective big sister, her laughter filling the house as she interacted with her brother. Lily often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. The experience had changed her in ways she couldn't have imagined, deepening her appreciation for the fragility and resilience of life. It had also strengthened her bond with Mark, their shared struggles forging a connection that felt unbreakable. One evening, as she rocked Samuel to sleep, she thought back to the pivotal moment in the hospital when she had made the decision to fight for him. It had been the hardest choice of her life, but looking at him now, his tiny fingers curled around hers, she knew it had been the right one. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in months, Lily felt a sense of peace. Their family had weathered the storm together, emerging stronger and more united. And as she gazed down at Samuel, she whispered softly, "You're our little miracle, and we'll always fight for you." The house was quiet except for the soft hum of the baby monitor on the nightstand. Lily sat in the rocking chair in Samuel's nursery, staring down at her tiny son as he slept peacefully in her arms. His breathing was steady, a gentle rise and fall that had become her greatest reassurance. The road to this moment had been long and grueling, marked by sleepless nights, countless prayers, and more moments of uncertainty than she could count. But now, as she held him close, she couldn't help but marvel at how far they had come. Bringing Samuel home had felt like a victory, but it was one that came with its own set of challenges. His premature birth meant he required constant care and monitoring. A portable oxygen tank sat beside his crib, its tubes carefully taped to his tiny face. An array of medications and feeding supplies filled the shelves, transforming the nursery into something that resembled a miniature hospital room. Every beep from his monitor sent a jolt of anxiety through Lily, a stark reminder of how fragile he still was. The weeks following Samuel's discharge were a blur of appointments and adjustments. Lily and Mark quickly learned the intricacies of his care, how to administer his medications, monitor his oxygen levels, and respond to any signs of distress. The learning curve was steep, but they tackled it together, driven by their shared determination to give Samuel the best chance at a healthy life. Their small community had rallied around them in ways they never expected. Neighbors dropped off meals and offered to babysit Sophie so Lily and Mark could focus on Samuel. Friends organized fundraisers to help cover the mounting medical expenses, and the outpouring of support left Lily deeply moved. It was humbling to see how many people cared, how willing they were to step up and help in their time of need. But the journey wasn't without its struggles. The financial strain was enormous, even with the community's help. Samuel's medical bills piled up quickly, and the cost of specialized equipment, medications, and frequent hospital visits added to the burden. Mark picked up extra shifts at work, often coming home exhausted but unwilling to show it. Lily noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the way his shoulders sagged when he thought no one was looking. He tried to put on a brave face, but she could see the toll it was taking on him. For Lily, the emotional weight was just as heavy. She often felt pulled in two directions, torn between her responsibilities as a mother to Sophie and her constant vigilance over Samuel. Guilt gnawed at her whenever she had to leave Sophie with her grandmother to rush Samuel to a doctor's appointment or spend hours attending to his care. She worried about how the situation was affecting her daughter, who was too young to understand why her parents were so preoccupied. One afternoon, as Lily sat on the floor of the living room, playing with Sophie while Samuel napped, she noticed her daughter staring at her with wide, curious eyes. "Mama sad?" Sophie asked, her voice small but filled with concern. The question caught Lily off guard, and she felt a lump rise in her throat. She scooped Sophie into her lap, holding her close. "Mama's just tired, sweetheart," she said, her voice trembling. "But I'm so happy to be here with you." Sophie nodded, seemingly satisfied with the answer, but the moment stayed with Lily. It was a reminder of how perceptive children could be, how much they picked up on even when they didn't fully understand the details. She resolved to make more time for Sophie, to ensure that her daughter felt just as loved and valued as Samuel. Despite the challenges, there were moments of joy and triumph that kept Lily and Mark going. Samuel's progress, though slow, was steady. Each milestone, his first time breathing without supplemental oxygen, his first bottle feed, his first smile, was celebrated with tears and laughter. The sight of him growing stronger every day filled Lily's heart with hope and gratitude. The bond between Sophie and Samuel blossomed as well. Sophie, despite her young age, took on the role of big sister with surprising enthusiasm. She loved to sit by Samuel's crib, singing softly to him or showing him her favorite toys. Watching the two of them together brought a sense of normalcy to their otherwise chaotic lives, a reminder of the love that bound their family together. As Samuel grew, the demands of his care began to ease. The doctors were cautiously optimistic about his long-term prognosis, and the day he no longer needed his oxygen tank felt like a turning point. It was a moment that marked the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with possibilities rather than fears. But the experience had left its mark on Lily and Mark in profound ways. They had both changed, their perspectives on life reshaped by the challenges they had faced. Lily found herself cherishing the small, everyday moments in ways she never had before: Sophie's laughter, Samuel's tiny hand gripping hers, the warmth of Mark's embrace after a long day. She had learned to find beauty in the mundane, to appreciate the strength and resilience of her family. Mark, too, had grown in ways he hadn't expected. The experience had deepened his sense of gratitude and purpose, inspiring him to be more present and engaged in his children's lives. He often spoke about wanting to give back to the community that had supported them, brainstorming ways to help other families facing similar struggles. One evening, as they sat together on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Mark turned to Lily and said, "You know, I've been thinking. What if we started a support group for parents of preemies? There are so many families out there going through what we did, and I feel like we could really make a difference." Lily smiled, her heart swelling with pride and love for the man she had chosen to spend her life with. "I think that's a wonderful idea," she said. "If there's one thing this experience has taught me, it's that we're stronger when we lean on each other." As they talked late into the night, sharing ideas and dreams for the future, Lily felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The journey had been difficult, and there were still challenges ahead, but they had come through it together. Their family had weathered the storm, emerging stronger and more united than ever. In the months that followed, Lily and Mark worked to turn their vision into reality. They partnered with local hospitals and community organizations to create a network of support for families of premature babies, sharing their story and offering resources to those in need. The initiative became a source of healing and purpose for both of them, a way to channel their experiences into something positive and meaningful. Through it all, Samuel continued to grow and thrive. He remained a symbol of resilience and hope, a reminder of the strength that could be found in the face of adversity. As Lily watched him take his first wobbly steps one sunny afternoon, she felt a surge of pride and gratitude that brought tears to her eyes. Their journey had been anything but easy, but it had taught them lessons they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. It had shown them the power of love and community, the importance of perseverance, and the beauty of finding light in the darkest of times. And as Lily held Samuel in her arms that evening, she whispered a silent promise to herself, to cherish every moment, to embrace every challenge, and to always remember the incredible journey that had brought them to this point. The years passed with a quiet but steady rhythm, each one carrying its own milestones and memories. Samuel, once so fragile and tiny, had grown into a lively, curious toddler who filled their home with laughter and mischief. The sight of him chasing after Sophie in the backyard, his giggles mingling with hers, was something Lily would never take for granted. It was a sound she had fought so hard to hear, a melody that reminded her of the strength it had taken to reach this point. Lily often found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought their family to this moment. The memories were vivid, some etched with pain, others shining with joy, and each one felt like a thread in the tapestry of their lives. She had been tested in ways she never could have imagined, forced to confront fears and challenges that seemed insurmountable. Yet, through it all, she had discovered a resilience she didn't know she possessed, a strength that had carried her through even the darkest days. As Samuel grew stronger, so did Lily's resolve to make their experience meaningful beyond their own family. The support group she and Mark had started for parents of premature babies had blossomed into something far larger than they ever anticipated. What began as a small gathering of local families had evolved into a non-profit organization that provided resources, emotional support, and advocacy for families navigating the challenges of premature birth. Their efforts resonated deeply with the community. Stories of their work began to spread, and soon they were receiving messages from families across the country who had heard about the group and wanted to be part of it. Lily spent countless hours organizing events, creating online resources, and connecting with medical professionals to ensure that families had access to the care and support they needed. It was exhausting work, but it was also deeply fulfilling, a way to turn their pain into purpose. Mark, too, found his own sense of fulfillment in their mission. He began volunteering at the local hospital, speaking to parents in the NICU and sharing their story. His calm demeanor and first-hand experience made him a source of comfort and hope for families facing the same uncertainties they once had. "You're not alone," he would tell them. "We've been there, and we're here to help." But even as they poured their energy into helping others, Lily and Mark were careful to nurture their own family. They had learned, sometimes the hard way, that it was easy to lose sight of each other in the midst of stress and responsibility. Date nights became a regular ritual, a chance to reconnect and remind themselves of the love that had carried them through so much. Sophie, now a spirited 5-year-old, thrived in her role as Samuel's big sister. She often took it upon herself to teach him things, from how to build block towers to the lyrics of her favorite songs. Watching their bond grow was one of Lily's greatest joys. It was a relationship forged in the crucible of their shared journey, a testament to the unbreakable ties of family. For Samuel, life was a testament to resilience. Though he still faced occasional health challenges, a lingering vulnerability to respiratory infections, regular checkups with specialists, he approached each hurdle with a determination that amazed everyone who knew him. "He's a fighter," Dr. Carter had said during one of their follow-up visits, a statement that felt like both an observation and a prophecy. One day, as Lily and Mark prepared for a fundraising gala their nonprofit was hosting, Lily found herself looking through old photographs. There were images of Samuel in the NICU, tiny and fragile, surrounded by wires and monitors. There were pictures of Sophie sitting beside his incubator, her little face pressed against the glass as she sang to him. And then there were the more recent photos, Samuel and Sophie playing together, Samuel's first birthday party, their family vacations. The contrast was striking, a visual representation of how far they had come. The gala itself was a resounding success, bringing together families, medical professionals, and community leaders to celebrate the strides they had made in supporting premature babies and their families. As Lily stood on the stage to deliver her speech, she felt a surge of emotion. Looking out at the crowd, she saw so many faces that had become part of their journey, parents who had turned to them for help, nurses and doctors who had been their lifeline, friends and neighbors who had rallied around them in their time of need. Tonight, we're here to celebrate not just the progress we've made, but the strength and resilience of every family who has faced the challenges of premature birth, Lily said, her voice steady but full of emotion. Our journey was not an easy one, but it taught us that even in the face of uncertainty and fear, there is always hope. Together, we've created a community that lifts each other up, that reminds us we are never alone. The applause that followed was thunderous, a wave of support that washed over her. As she stepped off the stage, Mark was there to greet her, his smile filled with pride. "You were amazing," he said, wrapping her in a hug. In the months that followed, Lily and Mark continued to expand their efforts. They partnered with hospitals to provide care packages for NICU families, launched awareness campaigns about the realities of premature birth, and lobbied for policy changes to improve support for parents and children. Their work became a source of healing, a way to transform their pain into something meaningful. But perhaps the most profound transformation was the one within themselves. Lily had learned to embrace the unpredictability of life, to find beauty in the moments of stillness and joy in the midst of chaos. Mark had discovered a deeper sense of purpose, a drive to make the world a better place for families like theirs. Together, they had grown stronger, their bond fortified by the challenges they had faced. One evening, as the sun set over their backyard, Lily watched Sophie and Samuel playing together. Samuel, now 3 years old, was chasing Sophie around the garden, his laughter ringing out like a melody. Lily felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for how far they had come, but for the people they had become along the way. Mark joined her, slipping an arm around her waist. "They're amazing, aren't they?" he said, nodding toward the children. "They are," Lily agreed. "I still can't believe how lucky we are." Mark turned to her, his expression thoughtful. "We've been through so much, but I wouldn't trade any of it. It's made us who we are." Lily nodded, her heart full. "And it's given us a purpose," she said softly. "To help others, to show them that even in the darkest times, there's always a way forward." As they stood there, watching their children play, Lily felt a profound sense of peace. Their journey had been one of challenges and triumphs, of heartbreak and healing. It had transformed them in ways they could never have imagined, leaving them stronger, more compassionate, and more connected than ever. And in that moment, surrounded by the love and laughter of her family, Lily knew that they were exactly where they were meant to be.